Hi ho, this movie frickin' sucked. It made me want to self-delete. The worst movie that I've ever seen. This thing was made for morons. Well, it finally happened. Snow White finally premiered today, March the 20th. Guys, this movie, oh my goodness, dude. Yeah, it was as awful as I was expecting. There's so many problems with this movie. I just got back from the theater like an hour ago. I literally just got back from the theater and I started recording this as soon as I hopped back into my house. Where can I start? Maybe I should start with the pros, since there's very little pros to this movie, very little that's actually good about it, right? So let's just start with what was good in the movie. The death scene, Snow White's death scene. Not because I don't like Rachel Zegler, but because the Snow White death scene itself was well executed. I gotta say, that was easily the best part of the movie. It's the only time in the whole film when Snow White was dying that I actually felt something. Like, the whole movie, literally, it was just one scene to another. I felt no emotion throughout the entire piece. Her death scene and the dwarves mourning for her on her deathbed is like the only scene in the whole movie that actually made me feel something. And I almost would have been convinced if not for the fact that the rest of the movie was trash. And the only other pro besides the death scene to this movie are the musical numbers. Mostly. There's a few really bad musical numbers I got to talk about, but for the most part, I'd say about maybe 70% of the musical numbers were actually quite good. And that's the only good parts of the movie, really, is the music. The musical numbers, the new music that they added for the film, as well as the retelling of the classic songs, those were actually well executed. I gotta give it to them there. But besides that, none of the dialogue or none of the scenes which are supposed to hold the music together sticks the landing. All of it just feels like this little hodgepodge of filmmaking, right? Now we're going to get to the negatives because, I don't know how else to put this except that the film was mostly trash. Oh, and by the way, if you guys couldn't already tell, we're doing a lot of spoilers here. Not that I don't think a lot of you really care. So here we go. I already told you the pros, now here for the cons, right? The cons. First off, man, the editing in this movie is a mess. The editing is all over the place. It was so obvious that, these people had to reshoot this thing to hell, and they're struggling to try to pull this thing together, right? And I think a big part of the editing, too, is besides them not having a sense of direction with this movie, there's way too many characters. There's a bunch of useless characters. You guys remember, that leaked image of Snow White back when this movie first started getting heat? You remember, that leaked image of all those diversity hires or whatever, who look like this little hodgepodge of, hippies or whatever living out in the forest? So those guys are in this movie. They're the bandits. They're not to be confused with the dwarves. The CGI dwarves and the woke bandits are two different groups of people. But the bandits basically should not even have been in this movie. They're easily, I think, the worst part of this film. They take so much out of this movie. They have absolutely zero character development. They're not characters. They're just diversity hires there to fill up the screen. That's all that they're there for. I think the reason why they put them in there, honestly, is to offset the 7 white CGI dwarves. That's actually my guess. The reason they had to do it is because all the dwarves are white, and they can't have too much whiteness going on for too long in the movie, so they had to throw in some diversity, right? And it's obvious that these guys are diversity hires, right? These guys literally look like the fucking Commodores. Like that group from the 70s? I swear they're going to break out singing Brick House or something like that, dude. It was crazy stuff, right? The other major gripes, because I got a lot of them about this movie, right? The cinematography is awful. The cinematography is all over the place. Dude, the camera, I swear, was so uncomfortably close to the actors' faces. You could actually see the pores, every last pore on their nose. It was uncomfortable to look at. Even the attractive people in the cast, like Gal Gadot, the camera being that close to her face, it was uncomfortable to watch. Speaking of Gal Gadot, her acting in this was complete freaking trash. Dude, she is trying way too hard in this movie. Right? She's never been a good actress. She's always been an attractive young woman, but she's never been a good actress. At least her looks distracted from her performance. Because, dude, her performance in this was awful. And you remember how I said that, for the most part, the musical numbers of this movie were strong? Well, there is a song that she sings, and she has never sung anything, to my knowledge.
Imagine there's no heaven.
much. It's obvious that she has no experience singing. Like, her singing was complete trash, dude. The number that they have her sing, it was so like over the top. It was crazy stuff. It was so tonally inconsistent with the rest of the movie. For the most of the film, she actually acts somewhat like a conniving villain. It's not a very good performance, but at least you get the sense that she's like this truly evil person. Whereas the musical number they have her sing was so amateurish and cartoony, and it felt like a Madonna number. Like, I can't really describe to you how this thing looked, other than that it was way too flashy. The costume design on her in that number was complete trash. I gotta say, the costuming in this movie is awful, like genuinely awful. And as she's singing that song, it literally feels like a Madonna number. She's singing like pop, while the rest of the cast is singing classical theater. And it's very obvious that who actually has training for singing in this movie, who doesn't, right? Say all you want about Rachel Zegler, she actually sings exceptionally well in this movie. She can actually really carry the singing aspect. I got a lot of things to say about her acting as well, but for now, I'm just going to say that her acting was not as good as her singing. Her singing actually held things together, but when you compare her singing to Gal Gadot's singing, it was like night and day. It was embarrassing to watch. I mean, like I said, it was basically a Madonna number for Gal Gadot's villain piece. I don't know how else to put it except that it was like Material Girl on steroids, but wearing the Evil Queen's dress. That's pretty much what it was. So, since we started talking about Rachel Zegler, let's get on to her now. How was she in this movie? Well, her acting is rough. It's not like it's not like, I wouldn't want to say that it was terrible, but it's not good. Like, it definitely was not terrible. Not to the level that I think Gal Gadot's performance was, where it felt kind of distractingly like obvious that she was not seasoned. This was more like moderately bad. But the fact is, that cinematography I was talking about earlier, the closer the camera would get to her face, it became more and more obvious to the audience that she's not a good actress. Her singing was way better than her acting. It made her performance almost tolerable when she sung those musical numbers. But the problem is, she's just not Snow White. She never has been, right? Skin as white as snow. She's not that character. It truly was remarkable. Because the guy that they have acting opposite of her, the huntsman, the one that she's supposed to fall in love with, so he gives a moderately decent performance, acting-wise. But like Gal Gadot, that guy cannot sing for shit. Like, that guy's singing was absolute trash. And that feeds into the editing, like I said. It's obvious that they had to kind of string together this hodgepodge in editing between her and the dude's relationship. It did not work one bit, I thought. But his singing was even worse than his acting. His acting was passable, but the problem is, he is like barely a character in this movie. He's there. He's definitely there in a lot of different scenes. But as a human being, he doesn't really feel like he's been fleshed out at all. He has no agency. He's just a guy who is rebelling against the tyrannical evil queen. But we don't actually feel like he's a character. The same way that his huntsmen don't feel like characters either. His little bandit of merry friends or whatever. And that's the problem, right? Because I think in the original script, there probably was a non-existent huntsman. I think he was barely there. And so in reshoots, they had to try to throw things together to see what worked. And obviously, it did not work. Because like I said, there's no chemistry between Zegler and her co-star at all. Like, literally no chemistry. It's crazy, actually. Rachel Zegler, she had more chemistry with the CGI dwarves who are non-existent, the people that are not even living actors. She had more chemistry with them on screen, the CGI animals and the dwarves, than she did with the man who's supposed to fall in love with her. So, when they actually did the death scene, like I said, I actually enjoyed the death scene. That was well executed. But when they had to do the True Love's Kiss, well, for one thing, I'm going to tell you right now, I am genuinely surprised that they even had the man, her huntsman, kiss her while she was unconscious and revive her. I am surprised they even left that in the story. I thought for sure, because, of Me Too issues, they were going to cancel that out completely. They actually had that. The only problem is there's no glass casket. What? What? How can there not be a glass casket, you might be asking? Well, there was not. You know how, like, it's iconic, her basically sleeping in that casket made of glass? Well, that was non-existent. There is no casket. She's just laying on, like, some rock and a shrine somewhere, just dead as fuck. Like, there is no casket, and there's no prince to overturn the casket and pour the apple out of her, I believe, like in the original fairy tale. He just kisses her, and she wakes the fuck up, And next thing you know, she is trying to lead a peaceful insurrection against the evil queen. And from then onward, this film, I mean, it was all over the place, right? Like I said, that third act, the her trying to overthrow the queen, I think is the weakest part of the movie for various reasons. I mean, the huntsman, because he's not a prince, of course he's not a prince, barely participates in that third act. After he brings Snow White back to life with the kiss, he's just sort of there, not really doing anything. And then Snow White is there to save the day because, of course, we can't have a man saving a woman at the end of the day, right? So, essentially, here's what's weird about the plot. The queen, to reinforce her power over the kingdom, she took the local farmers and she made them foot soldiers for her tyranny. And all the farmers of the community just went along with it, and they started oppressing their neighbors. Like, that does not even make sense, because in what world would the farmers become the tyrants against their own neighbors who are farmers themselves? Maybe they're trying to make some communist allegory there. I honestly don't know. But this third act is ridiculous, right? Because in that third act, Snow White, she essentially was banished from the kingdom after the queen thought she killed her. And then she returns to the kingdom having been revived by the prince. And she comes across these guards, right, to work for the queen. The guards want to stop her and stuff. And instead of, like, them being, like, some insurrection that you'd expect, like some final fight scene, instead, it was just an extremely boring I am Spartacus moment where Zegler talks to the local men of the community. And next thing you know, all the guards are pulling I am Spartacus, telling the queen that I am of the people, I am not with you. And then this starts getting repeated. I am with the people, I'm not with you. I am with the people. Kind of like I am Spartacus, I am Spartacus. And it was just absolutely ridiculous. And what's even crazier is the queen's guards, right? You'd think they'd all be white dudes. A good number of them are actually people of color for some reason. So I guess the queen accepts diversity into her reign of tyranny, but, whatever. But, yeah, that happens. And then the queen just gets pissed, and Gal Gadot cannot act for shit, so it's embarrassing. She just gets pissed, and then she goes to the mirror on the wall, right? And she tries to self-affirm herself, her gender affirm herself, asking the mirror, like, who is the fairest of them all? And the mirror gives her, like, the answer, like, well, you're not the fairest, Snow White is, right? And then this queen just gets pissed, and then she shatters the mirror. And I don't know what happened after that. She just gets dusted like Thanos out of nowhere right after she smashes the evil mirror. And she just disappears into this mirror into like another black hole dimension, dude. And then like the mirror reforms itself. And then the mirror is reflecting back on Snow White being the fairest of them all. I wish I was making this up, but this is exactly what happened. As I'm watching this in the theater, I'm thinking, what the fuck is going on? This is the most confusing thing. It made absolutely no sense. Because, it's been a long time since I've watched the original cartoon. I can't really remember that movie all too well. But I'm pretty sure, didn't the queen get killed by like the huntsman or something? Correct me if I'm wrong. I just haven't seen that movie in forever. But in this one, she basically gets Thanos dusted after she smashes the mirror, kind of like the Phantom at the end of the Phantom of the Opera when Gerard Butler's getting all like pissed off and stuff. And then that's it. That's the end of the movie. And then at the very end of the movie, the kingdom that Snow White now reigns over, they're all wearing white because they're as pure of heart as Rachel Zegler, a.k.a. Snow White, is. And yeah, that was the movie. That's the end of your story. And Dopey talks. He's the one narrating the story. Speaking of which, there's an insane amount of narration in this movie. Dopey, the dwarf, is narrating this entire movie. And, like, I swear, there must have been, like, 7 minutes of pure narration in this movie. Like, way too much exposition. Way too much over-explaining. Way too much telling, not showing. This thing was abysmal to watch. The thing is, though, I'm sure the little kids in my theater, I know that they liked it because they don't know any better. So, if you have little kids, maybe they might enjoy this, although it was pretty embarrassing to sit through this thing, right? I mean, guys, when I was going to the theater, I tried to be as discreet as possible. I didn't want people to know that I was a grown man in the middle of this movie. But people noticed. People took looks at me. They're like, what is this guy doing here? So I was in and I was out, but unfortunately I didn't go unnoticed like I would have hoped. But I did it for you guys, so I hope you enjoy the content that I'm putting out today. I'm definitely probably going to make a longer video of this, really breaking things down piece by piece. Maybe a full video essay. I honestly don't know if I can have the ability to make content that long. We will see. But for now, this was my initial out of the theater review. This movie was a disaster. I'd give it like a 2 out of 10 at best, maybe 4 out of 10 tops, because of those musical numbers, which actually, for the most part, were pretty good, except for, like I said, Gal Gadot. But beyond that, you know, if you don't want to suffer, I wouldn't recommend you see this movie. If you want to laugh and have a fun time making fun of something, you should definitely watch this movie. Because I literally had moments of this film where I burst out laughing unintentionally. I didn't mean for that to happen. It just sort of happened. I thought it was hilarious. But anyway, guys, that was the video. I appreciate you guys being on this journey with me as I've been trying to make these Snow White videos here on YouTube. Those have been performing pretty well, so I thank you guys for that. But anyway, thanks so for watching. And if you like this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. I'll see you guys in the next one.